we're not the right firm for the founder who's like, I got all the answers. If you think you can hire every single function and you won't walk in the room and say, I suck at something, or I am not very good at this, because we all suck at something and we're all not very good at something. And we all hate doing certain things. The best founders admit that.
Welcome to Venture Voices, where we interview emerging managers within the venture ecosystem. I'm Richard Kerby, a partner at Equal Ventures, and today we have the pleasure of having Steven Rosenblatt from Ocean Ventures. Steven, welcome.
Richard, always fun to see you, my friend.
Likewise, man, likewise. And, let's just jump right in, man. Let's start from the top, I guess. Where did Oceans come from? What inspired it, and how does it reflect what you guys do?
So if you have seen the movie Ocean's 11, and if you really think about the original cast, George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Julia Roberts, Matt Damon, Andy Garcia, Bernie Mac, Casey Affleck, there's this amazing talent that decided to come together to make an amazing movie that probably all of them would have been normally, too expensive to hire, but they did it for the greater good of building something great. Well, it's funny. So my partner Josh was watching the movie Ocean's 11 when he had left Facebook with his kids, and he said, "This is what I want to do." And his daughter said, "What? We're going to rob banks? What do you mean?" And he said, "No. You see this amazing group of people that have come together for the collective good? That's what I want to do. I want to get the best people I know in tech and work with them." So I was still president of Foursquare. I was still running Foursquare. So we had this code name. We were meeting and we were just calling it Ocean, right? Because of Ocean's 11. And then we officially were like, okay, we're starting. What are we going to call this? And we looked at each other and we said, well, what do you mean? Oceans. And we're like, really? Should we call it Oceans? And I said, you know what? I think it's meant to be. Like, my two favorite bands in the world are Pearl Jam and U2. And they both have songs called Ocean. So I'm like, great team, like the essence of it. And then listen, startups go through these choppy waves. It was kind of destined to be Ocean.
Nice. No, love that back. I actually had no idea that was the answer. Ocean's 11 is actually one of my favorite movies of all time. And so love hearing that. And also to the point you made, getting great people together, you hopefully allowed to great execution, one on the fun side for you guys, but also hopefully in the folks that you invest in. And lastly, you clearly resemble Brad Pitt, so it makes a ton of sense.
That's why we're doing this, because you always have just such great things to say about me. And that's why. I try. I wish my wife would think the same
thing. But maybe doubling down this like Ocean's 11 concept here, Steven, like you all really push and praise like this team-based support system that you have over at Oceans. Can you share how like that approach sets Oceans apart from other folks? Because obviously, like ourselves at Equal, you are an emerging manager and there's a lot of us. And so it's great to understand how you kind of set yourselves apart, both on the founder side as well as on the LP side.
Yeah. So let's take a step back, like why we really started Ocean. So I spent years in New York mentoring founders. And I was very lucky to sit in the boardroom with some of the most legendary VCs for the last 15 years. Bob Davis at Highland Capital, who's one of the OG VC investors, Ben Horowitz, Albert Wenger, Barry Schuler, Bijan Sabet, incredible. So I learned a ton about the firms, what I thought they did great, where I thought there was improvement. Also, I started in New York tech in 1999, even though I look like Brad Pitt. But I've been, and there were no engineers here in New York. It was I go to these events now and it's so amazing to see thousands of people, but there were like 50 people in New York tech, right? So you get to you meet everyone over the years. And what started happening, so after I sold a company that we built called Quattro to Apple, I was getting bombarded by founders, right? And accelerators. So when David Tisch was running Techstars, like in 2010, 11, and they would just be like, can you sit down with the founder and like help them out? And I love that because that's like one of the things I love, mentoring and giving back. But what I started to realize over the years is just most early stage investors either hadn't built from the 0 to 1 through scale, they hadn't been through some of the hard times through '01 and '08, or they just didn't have a desire to support founders, frankly. And what I kept hearing over, I mean, hundreds of conversations over like years and years from founders is around three core themes they'd come to me with. Steven, how'd you bring in this talent? Or how do you hire a salesperson? I don't know how to do that. Or like, can you teach me? Or how did you turn a mobile company in '08 when no one, like we were still in like feature phone into like a business that started to generate revenue that got the attention of Apple to sell it, right? Or Foursquare. How'd you lead that like crazy pivot? And then there was always like the funding. Like, how do I like understanding the like venture funding flywheel? So after literally hundreds of conversations, after like hearing over and over these investors, after learning from the best, I think VCs, I was like, you know what? I just don't want to have another conversation with a founder where I feel like my time and what I'm spending with them, I really wanted to have a bigger impact, right? I want to really kind of take it more than just giving them advice and disappearing. And my partners felt the same way. We had talked about that. And that was kind of what, we said, let's build a firm to tackle the three areas, because they had heard the same thing for the last 20 years. Team, talent, go-to-market, and fundraising. And so that's what we did when I started this with my partner, Josh. And then we brought in, I'll talk about the team, but it was exactly to tackle those three areas, because that's the pain point I heard most from founders over all these years.
That's super helpful there, Stephen. And I guess, it maybe more tangible there. It's great to get an example of like how, the Oceans team has used this kind of team-based approach to like be helpful to founders and actually provide value to them.
Yeah. So my partners, so when we started Oceans again, it was myself and Josh Ron. Josh had opened Facebook New York in 2007. I met him in '99. We were running around the city, early internet, selling basically banner ads and pop unders. I mean, it was like early internet kind of media. That's what New York was. It was a lot of digital media. And again, we're no engineers here. So Josh had the good fortune of opening Facebook New York in '07 and like has this amazing go-to-market background, right? So between my executive background, although I grew up in sales, his go-to-market, where he was sitting between engineering and product, we kind of said, all right, these other three lanes, like the three lanes we want to tackle, let's go find the right people to do it. He's like, Glenn Handler. Glenn was Cheryl's first recruiter at Facebook. She brought him over from Google in 2008. Glenn he'd opened up Eng offices all over the world. And then in 2008, he helped Cheryl build out the business org, right? So he joined us, people. The second lane was, that go-to-market, figuring out, I always say it's like go-to-market to find product market fit. Because you're not, in the early days, you're still trying to just figure out, do I have a product that, can I get not just customers, but how do I build a scalable product? So that was me, Josh, and then Sarah joined us. Sarah had a 20-year global client services ops background, mostly kind of helping in SaaS and NLP companies. And then the finance side, I happened to meet Brian Liu. He thought he was coming to interview with me at Foursquare. I'm like, no, Brian, not Foursquare. I got something different for you. Go. This is what we're working on. So Brian had 15 plus years corp dev M&A finance background in the Time Warner Time Inc. world. He had bought dozens and dozens of startups, so really understood what startups needed to do to get acquired. And he's an engineer by trade. So now we have those lanes and the people. So how do we put that into practice? Again, I think, let's take a portfolio company that we're both in, which is James at David Energy. We all love James. James is incredible. When we first met James, we like to say that James talked energy, not tech, right? He talked energy, not business. And James is fantastic. We've watched him grow. But I think when you talk to James early on, we sat with James, we really helped him. Glenn spent a lot of time with him on the recruiting, thinking about recruiting, understanding how to recruit roles outside of energy. So we all get involved. We kind of like think of it as like we pass the baton depending on the founder's needs. And as you know, these are these existential moments or these very critical moments where a founder's having this, these key things that they got to tackle. And then one of us or one or two of us will get involved to help. But like they're running their business and they're like, if we didn't exist, they'd still have the talent to figure it out. But we just try and help them accelerate and not make the same mistakes that we made.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful context there. And yeah, James, awesome climate operator and almost as good, maybe even better surfer too.
Oh, amazing surf.
And going back again, I hate to kind of continue to harp on this same theme of like bringing this collective of amazing people together to support founders. How do you guys break up the roles within Ocean?
Yeah, it's so we kind of think of it as we have this like really inherent advantage because like when we're assessing a founder, right? Like, listen, when we're investing in pre-seed and early seed, you're investing in people, right? So collectively, I've hired hundreds of people. Glenn's hired thousands of people, right? And we've also had the good fortune, like Zuck interviewed Josh, that he had to convince Zuck to hire him at Facebook when he got hired, right? I sat in front of Steve Jobs for 3 hours before they bought our company. Like we have been lucky enough in our lives to sit around extraordinary talent. And so when we see someone and we're assessing them, there's no math because they don't have a business yet. So I think one of the things, Glenn will do is really hone in and really unpack the talent side. And we go really deep on people, talent, capabilities, their ability to, we think their ability to attract and build talent and just understanding that they have some of the characteristics that we've seen. So Glenn will really double down there, right? When it's on the financing side, Brian's amazing. I can't tell you how many times we'll get financial docs, cap tables, you name it, when we're digging through things that like the best law firms don't even catch, that Brian just has that DNA and he's able to like pull apart and assess and see, right? So that's all on the assessment part. And then Sarah really has built this operational process internally to make sure we're consistent, to build internal tools that we can scale. Josh and I basically drive a lot of the deals forward, right? And so we're kind of like, call it investment committee, right? Ultimately, we're Josh and I, like we always say, if one of us want to do something, as long as the other one's not going to like walk out the door and say, at this, I quit, like this is not what I signed up for, then we'll do it. But we debate, we discuss, and we have the benefit of having Brian, Sarah, and Glenn's insight at the table to challenge us, to think about things, to look at things from every angle, and to allow us to do diligence in a way that is not only, in a timely manner at the speed of seed, but also in a very responsible manner. And that's how we work things. And then on the post, once we make an investment, then again, the beautiful thing founders know from day one, they meet all of us. They meet all of us in the final pitch. And so we try and break the walls down. That was something that was always frustrating for me. I had amazing VC firms, but sometimes I was working with one partner when there may have been like another partner at the fund who had actually better experience, more relevant for what I'm doing. And what we say to founders day one, this isn't a Steven deal or a Josh deal. This is an Oceans deal. And our goal is to just help you get to the next level with the right, however we can help you. And that's kind of how we operate.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think that Oceans collective will only benefit founders. And so it's great to have folks that are functional experts to kind of dive in and help out where needed. And you kind of alluded actually to my next question now, which is around, what's the framework or process for getting, deals completed at Oceans? Is there a formal investment committee? Is it consensus? Is it, individual partner conviction? How should one think of a deal getting across the finish line for you all?
Yeah. So, for us, like, I think the thing we really do is we really unpack the founder's character and ask a lot of, I think if you talk to any founder who's gone through our process, going to be like, it's very different because they ask very tough questions, but questions that really show us that they've done this before. So we ask really, really like, I would say there's structure to it, but it's also like really unpacking the motivation as to why a founder is starting what they're founding. What is it about them that we think, they think and we think allows them to build that 10 to 15 year journey of success. And I think for us, usually one of us will take the first meeting. Usually it's Josh or I, right? Sometimes Glenn is really assessing like the people talent skill set, right? And he'll filter. We'll kind of take a first meeting and then we'll spend time, do one or two meetings as an individual. Like I'll just kind of, work with, a founder, meet a co-founder. And then we go through it as a partnership, right? And the rest of the team gets involved, and we'll really we have a non-fancy, non-sexy process called decision generator, which we assess on multiple dimensions. But what it really helps us do is ask questions that maybe we're not thinking of, right? And so it's a lot of questions, a lot of digging in deeply at a number of different dimensions. And then listen, obviously we have an associate, and if we can, get if there's market intelligence to get, we'll do that. Well, I think the process is usually somewhere between 3 and 5 meetings with us, where we'll spend a few hours with the founder and founding team, and we'll get into some of the most difficult questions. And then we're very deeply, I think one of the things we're like, as you know, like 1 or 2 degrees away from a lot of people, so we typically can really reference really hard on the quality of the founder and anything in the background. But we also have very specific things we look at. So that's it. And then we have, our committee is, again, we'll fight, we'll discuss, we'll debate, right? And it's incumbent upon the person who's really loves this to convince everyone else. If there's people someone who really like, we should never do this deal, why we should do this deal. But ultimately, Josh and I again, it comes back to Josh and I making the final decision.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think those references got to be super important because, as you mentioned, you're evaluating whether or not this team is the right team to go win. And so getting as much data as possible on them is going to be paramount for you guys succeeding, obviously. And you mentioned how, you are all 1 degree away from someone that you need to get to at any point in time. And so how does that relate into how you actually source opportunities?
Your collective networks is very, very impressive. And I imagine that's got to lead to some pretty awesome opportunities coming your way as well.
Yeah, I mean, so I think one of the benefits of I guess having built and been part of some of the most iconic companies in some ways of the last 20 years, and being around the New York ecosystem before Google bought engineers here in 2003, because that was really like the first stepping stone to the beginning of New York kind of getting into what I'd say digital media, digital content, right? That was, that was the early days of New York was internet media 101, right? Then it became Google brought engineers here. Then you started to see companies, and then like the Tumblrs and the Foursquares of the world started to develop, and that kind of started to mushroom. But I think the thing is listen, Glenn was part of Google. Google opened the office 2003 or so. Glenn was opening up worldwide offices, but here in New York, starting in 2005, around amazing talent, right? Josh, 2007, Facebook. They were in a Regis space. There wasn't WeWork. It was called Regis. It was it was a few of them.
I think it's called Regis again now, by the way.
But right. I think as of next week, it will be called Regis. Regis will acquire WeWork, I guess. But yes, you're so Josh opened that, and again, around amazing talent, right? I built a company called Quattro Wireless in '08. It was a Boston base. I opened the New York office here, but we built that. We were then acquired by Apple. I opened the Apple office here. You're around these kind of networks of people, and then I became, after that, in 2012, then I went over to Foursquare and then ultimately became president, right? Foursquare had amazing talent. Now, a lot of them, the early ones came over from early Google, right? And Dennis met a lot of them when Crowley, the founder of Foursquare, when he sold Dodgeball to Google and then kind of brought some of that talent over. So the people we've hired or groomed now, they're at Stripe, they're at Slack. Noah Weiss, who I sat with for years, who was running product at Foursquare, is now the global head of product at Slack, right? Like TikTok, Snap, Pinterest. These are people we've hired. These are people we've worked with. These are we work next to. And then part of our, when we started Oceans, we kind of said, one of the things that was really important to our DNA was let's bring on our LPs that have this long tail of operators and founders. That was really important to us. So that's how it all started. Now we have 50 portfolio companies, meaning 100 or plus founders and co-founders. And the way I kind of think of it, and you and I talk a lot of sports, is when you're an athlete who played on the field for a long time, other athletes who happen to be on the field, and that was New York. And they kind of all, everyone kind of hangs out in the same place. And that really gives us a really huge advantage. And so the people who introduce us are people who we've worked with, worked next to, work for, then ultimately invested in. but it's this crazy, concentric circles of talent. My partner Josh sits in this like chat group with the first 250 people of Facebook. I sit in this chat group with the first early Foursquare. It's like all these little communities of amazing talent that, I think we're just kind of lucky from that perspective. And that's how we source.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I think like those are just great, organizations to pull talent from, to track talent and ultimately, invest in talent. And I guess maybe just switching gears here more to like the investing side of the equation here, it'd be great to just, if you could walk us through like a recent Oceans investment and what got you guys to conviction to say yes on that particular founder, team, business.
So I would say for us, like the founders, a lot of like the traits that we look for, I'd say that's consistent, is like a level of self-awareness that others don't have. The desire to build the world's best team and surround themselves with the best talent. The love of velocity. And, most of our founders are second, third, or fourth time starting a company, not all of them. And if they're not, then they have this level of passion or insight that is just like, you could tell they have to build it. We're not the right firm for the founder who's like, I got all the answers, right? Like, I got it. I don't ever want to talk to you. Like, that's great. We are not your firm, right? We are not your firm if you're the one who's not the right firm. If you think you can hire every single function and you won't walk in the room and say, I suck at something, or I am not very good at this. Because we all suck at something and we're all not very good at something. And we all hate doing certain things. The best founders admit that, in our opinion, right, that we've been around. So they all fit kind of a similar pattern. I'll give you an example. We're closing an investment as we speak with a founder who sold his previous company to Twitter like pre-Elon. We were reconnected by one of our LPs who happens to be an extremely respected and well-known New York founder. And the founder came up with the idea. Well, he was running a number of different initiatives at Twitter. But most importantly, his co-founders are incredibly complementary. He's not an engineer, but he so happened to bring in an engineer who I knew as a founding team who actually was an early Foursquare engineer, right? Who's a 1% talent, right? And so he understood enough, he's self-aware enough, like, again, he can build anything, right? This is the thing he wants to build. The talent that he's hired, he's built a team of people who've worked with him, both in his previous startup, but also realize that there are people who may not have been on that team that he wanted to bring in because they fill a different gap. And they have like the perfect mix of biz ops, front and back end talent. And they're starting this company from an insane amount of passion. That's like the bullseye, right? Like, this person doesn't need to. He could have walked in and said, yeah, I got this. I'm going to own 100% of this company. I'll give out a little bit of equity and this is my company. And instead he's taken a different approach, which is, no, I know that the only way I can build a world-class company is to have a world-class co-founding team from the day one. And I think that is very much how we, I think that's a lot of the pattern of what we try and assess and look for and the type of companies we go after.
Yeah, no, I think that the passion piece you mentioned there is so important. Think of it very similarly. I think, folks derive passion from like usually one of two ways. Like either they've been working in that category or space for quite a while, and that's how they develop their passion, or they've had some sort of life experience that's driven them to go solve a particular passion point. But I definitely kind of get a sense for like what the Oceans founder looks like. And, not to harp again, but go back to James at David Energy, that dude is passionate about climate, more so than anything else in the world. And so you can see why he's driven to go win.
Totally. Right. And that's exactly like that DNA. It's like, we learned so much from that initial conversation, and you could tell whether we exist or not, he is going to do this the rest of his life. This is his life's work, and this is what he loves. And I think, it doesn't have to be someone's life work per se, but it has to be someone like, there is a real reason why they want to solve this. And because you and I both know, right? Like these are, the last 3 years, somehow we try to convince ourselves and investors that a company could like shoot straight up and be successful. And like we stayed away from every one of those, or at least try to be. Nothing goes up. It is like, if you're going to build a public company one day, it is rocky. You're going to go through up peaks and valleys. It's never a straight linear line.
and it's you're signing up for a 7 to 10 year minimum journey. And so you better love what you're doing. You better have the stomach to be able to weather that. You better have the ability to hire amazing people, because the only way to build these companies and survive what will ultimately, there will always be a near death moment if you're building a great company over an extended period of time, is to have amazing people around the table. And I think that's so important.
No, I agree on that front there. And then maybe we'll switch gears again and go back to just like Steven Rosenblatt, the man, the myth, the legend behind him. So you mentioned selling Quattro to Apple, and then leaving Apple to go join Foursquare. And so what led you to kind of leave this globally renowned institution that is Apple to go join, at the time, a much smaller company in Foursquare?
So I'm addicted to building companies, and I'm addicted to like the journey to build the company. It's a drug for me. It is something sometimes I ask myself why I love that much pain, because it is hard, right? Building an emerging fund is a lot of pain. It is, but for some reason I like pain, but I really like the energy and just that passion that goes into how companies get built. And so that was Quattro for me, right? And Quattro, we built Quattro 0809 during a brutal time. I mean, way worse than this period now. And there were, and I loved it. I loved the energy. I loved building it. And then we sell to Apple, and we were acquired, while Steve Jobs was still CEO. And Steve had this vision of building this product called iAd. And iAd was supposed to, the reason he wanted to build it was he was really worried at the time that Google was going to pull all the ad revenue away from iOS into Android. And developers, he knew that in order to sell high margin, beautiful phones, you need the developer community. So we were kind of like in some ways a hedge, but he also wanted to build the most beautiful ad experiences and developer experiences on mobile. Because early days of mobile, there were like these little tiny banners that you can't even see, right? Because video, like, it still was low bandwidth.
Yeah, I remember those banners were so small that you couldn't even click the X button because your fingers were just too fat for it.
Fat finger, always. So for me, it was amazing. Like, I launched this product called iAd. I was invited to sit second row when we launched it at WWDC. It was incredible, but then Steve Jobs passed away, right, during that time. And when he passed away, I think like it was this moment at Apple. Apple acquired like under 10 companies at that time. I think most of the people at the company didn't know what to do with us, right? And so they were like, "Who are you? Like, what do you guys do? And what are we really doing?" I don't think anyone had that same vision. So I knew, for me, it was like an amazing experience. But then I was like, you know what? Life's short, and I was meant to go build. And I think I want to go build again, because I'm not going to spend a couple of years here while they figure out what to do. And to be honest, like, that's now the backbone of Apple search ads, which is now like a $5-6 billion business, but it could have been a $50 to $100 billion business, because we were way ahead at the time than Amazon was in their ads business, like way ahead, right? So I left after 2 years post acquisition, and for me, it wasn't. I actually wanted to build a venture firm back in 2012, because I had watched back here in New York, there was, we didn't have Equal. We didn't have great firms like you guys, right? It was tiny. USV, Lyra had just started, ENIAC had just started. They were all small. So I watched and I said, again, there's no real homebrew, hadn't even started on the West Coast. And so I had this like mindset of like operator-led early stage, right? And I wanted to kind of take a little bit of the best of what I watched David Tisch do at Techstars, a little bit of Borthwick at BetaWorks, what they were doing early on, and merge that into a venture. Well, while I was going through that process, I meet Ron Conway. Ron's like, legendary venture investor, the most persuasive person and the most gracious person in the world. I mean, he literally like opens his arm and like, but he's got this constant Rolodex. He's like, Steven, before you do this, I need you to meet Dennis at Foursquare. Because I was like, I'm not moving out west. Who's your favorite New York company? I'm happy to meet them. He's like, he loved me. He was like, I want you to work at one of my companies. Like, you have to. Don't start anything. And I meet Dennis at Foursquare, and they were like, we just raised this, 75 million from Andreessen Horowitz, which was the first New York round Andreessen did. And we got to figure out a business model. Will you advise us? So I disagreed. I said, yeah, I'll do it for 3 months. I got to go work on this other thing. So that's kind of how it happened.
Wow, interesting story there. And then maybe just continue to push forward on that story. Foursquare had a remarkable and turbulent run, and so what are the tea leaves that Steven can share about that experience? After you went from advisor to full-time exec.
Well, so what was so interesting to me about Foursquare was this amazing group of people. Like, really, the talent was incredible. And Dennis was this infectious leader. And what I didn't know so day one, I started advising. I come into the office. He's like, I want you in the office. If you can't come in, 3-4 days a week. I said, fine. I just had my second kid. I was living in a small apartment in New York. My wife was home. I was like, I get the hell out of the apartment. So it was a great convenient excuse. I'll go hang out with these guys, right? Day one, Dennis is like, coming to the exec meeting. I'm like, I'm just an advisor. I don't know if you want me to share everything with me. Meanwhile, I had just come from Apple. When you work at Apple, everything's so secretive. You just don't know who's working. Like, it's so secretive. The only way you know whether someone's working on the same thing is through code language, essentially. So I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I love this. He's inviting an advisor to come sit, like, super transparent. Like, that's pretty cool. What I started to dig into, I just started asking questions. And what I didn't know at the time was Foursquare was losing about 35 million in revenue. And the only relatively line item, there were two line items of revenue. And it was like the minimum. It was like nothing. One was we had sublet our top floor to another company, and they were paying us to Fueled, which is like like the studio. And then we were selling like sponsored badges for like a couple of bucks. And I was like, wait, Foursquare just raised $75 million. This company just raised $75 million and they're losing like 35 million with no revenue. Holy crap. This is wild. Like, what is going on here? But they had Foursquare, we had these amazing assets, right? We had this developer ecosystem. Everyone was building, like, early Instagram was built on top of Foursquare API before Facebook, right? Like, all these amazing developers were using our API. We had this incredible data set because we had amazing engineers and amazing talent. So I just said, there's no way we're going to build Yelp 2.0, which is what they had raised money to build. I'm looking at the data. There's no way we can monetize our consumer app this way. However, I see this incredible data and developer infrastructure that I think we can build on top of. And that's what we did. And they were like, I go to South by Southwest. I'll never forget this. Couple people coming up to me. They're like, they're trying to keep you, right? I'm like, yeah, I kind of think that, but I'm not. I'm going to go start my thing. And then then Dennis is like, yeah, Ben Horowitz would love to speak to you, and like he wants to talk to you about sticking around, and like we want you to stick around. Like you got Ben and Albert from like all these amazing people, and I was like, okay, I'll do this for a year or two. Turned out to be 6.
There you go. Well, it turned out to be a great experience. Obviously, it's led to additional operator learnings and what you're doing here at Oceans. And I guess maybe like combining those two like parts of your career now of Oceans plus Foursquare and operating in general, you're a career sales guy. That's your jam. That's what you hung your hat on prior to Ocean. And so, how are you helping your founders post investment on the sales front, given that you've done it for so long and selling different products too?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. So for me, my personal superpower is taking a look at assets and seeing where a business should go, right? And then also really and motivating and energize, like building the best talent, right? Building teams. So I know how to go to market, I know how to sell, but I think the thing I've grown in my career is I know how to attract and understand what you need to do to get people, but also to see what the real business opportunity is, right? Quattro, when I came into Quattro in 2008, again, this amazing founding team of like rock stars who had just sold another company. Well, the company was a WAP builder, right? When I say WAP, I mean, that's what it was in '08. It was like, how do you turn something that can show up on a BlackBerry device? And I said, no, 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 this isn't going to scale, guys. Like, this is cute, but we just raised money. We're trying to build a venture scale business. We've got to pivot into something much different and bigger. And that's what led us down this path to tweak the model, change it, and scale. At Foursquare, we would have gone down Yelp. We would have been out of business a year later because there was no revenue to be made. And I helped pivot Foursquare to a B2B company that when I left, we were doing 100 million in revenue and gotten burned down into like, we were losing like single digits millions. So what I try and do, I mean, James calls me James getting a lot of love today because we all love James. But James, he called me the chief instigator. And it's not instigating, it's seeing and identifying and like really asking questions, which is, okay, if you're going to build a venture-backed business, what is the thing you're building that's venture-backable? What's the thing that's going to have venture scale? What's the thing that's going to, go up and to the right at a velocity that, can really transform things? So for me, a lot of the conversations I have with founders are really centered around, why are you building the thing you're building? What is it that you're trying to solve for? Why are the first customers or consumers you're going after the right ones that are going to allow you to find the next 100, the next 1,000, the next 10,000 that bleeds into a massive market? And what's the approach you're taking? And I think like when I was running Foursquare, like, man, sitting in product meetings and directing product strategy, with our product team and the direction of the business, like it's a lot of these just fundamental business conversations to get there. The go-to-market things, like kind of I do that in my sleep. And so does Josh. And like, we're really great at that. But I think when you're building to find product market fit, there's a lot of steps to do that, because one of the biggest mistakes founders make is they're just like, hey, someone wants to buy, or someone wants to work with me, I'm going to work with them. Well, you have to ask yourself, is this the right person to go down the rabbit hole with? Because if it's not, it's going to cost me a lot of money and burn a lot of money.
That makes a ton of sense there. And I guess when thinking about, ups and downs, you mentioned a couple times now of companies, which I think is factually correct. It would be great to get an example of a company maybe in the Oceans portfolio where, you make an investment, for some reason or other, things are just not going in the right direction. And at some point they've triggered it, they figure it out, and now they're on the right path and up at the right where you want them to be. And so this would be great to hear about, maybe some of those obstacles that folks in the portfolio have overcome to hopefully go on to more success.
Yeah. I mean, so I'll give kind of, one interesting example. I'll give kind of two examples, right? Like, so one on the downside is we had a company in early on that was in the student debt space. And then the government froze student debt payments. And basically there were two other companies in around the space and all of them were in trouble, right? Because there's no student debt money to be paid. And the colleges they had to think about other things. So I'll never forget, this one founder came to us, and we were a small investor, and was telling us, and it was clear they had a pivot. And they came to us, and said, oh, we're going to go do this other thing. And this other thing was so like, I'm like, where'd you come up with that? And like, well, I don't know. I think like, we feel like we have the responsibility to pivot. And I don't know, we were brainstorming a lot of ideas, and this is what we came up with. And we thought like, there's an opportunity here. And we said to the founder, I'm like, is this really what you want to do? Is this really because if you do, and you love this, we'll do it. We'll support it, even though we can't control what you do. I said, but if this isn't really what you do, I know you've taken on a lot of stress, and there is another path, which is you can wind down the company. You've got money in the bank. And I could tell you like, and she literally looked at us and she said, thank you. Thank you. Because I felt like the response, like I had to pivot and try, but I need to take a break. And we went to the lead investor and we're like, you're supportive of this? You sure? She's like, well, what else are they going to do? I'm like, what else are they going to do? I don't know. I'd like, anything greater than zero is better than zero. I'm like, we'd be very happy with 40 cents on the dollar because otherwise it's going to zero. And sure enough, we coached them and coached her, and we talked to the lead investor, and they wound up winding that down, and we got money back, which we would have gotten zero back. So I think those type of things are really hard conversations to have that we have. On the flip side, we had another founder who, um, again, COVID created lots of different challenges, but he had a challenge with his first sales hire, right? And that person, for whatever reason, decided to leave, and this founder took it really hard and didn't know what to do. It was kind of paralyzed, and we really helped coach them through that, how to deal with it, how to think about it. Listen, you're going to go through this is okay. This is like, it's okay that this happened. Now let's use it. Let's use it to now upgrade the position, or you use it to think about the position differently. Anyway, fast forward, that founder wound up raising an incredible round that Andreessen Horowitz led, a couple months later, and literally like called us and said, I know you guys don't have pro rata rights. I know you don't, you're a small check, but I will make whatever room is necessary for you. And honestly, like, whether you want to put money in or not, we did. But I'm not sure we would have been here if it wasn't for like that, like very pointed advice that you gave us during that process.
Yeah, no, that's a great story. And, whenever you can find founders, fighting to get you pro rata that you don't even have legal requirements for, and that shows the impact you guys are having on founders. And so, great anecdote to share there. And yeah, I guess to be on like fund evolution side of things, how has Oceans evolved from day zero to today? Obviously several investments, funds have been raised. What's changed and evolved for you all?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that for us is we've been consistent in our approach, right? We raised a small first fund, 11 million in like 2020. And there were a lot of people, who were like, go raise hundreds of millions of dollars. Your backgrounds, go do it. You should do it. And we're like, nope, that's exactly what we're not going to do, right? Because it goes back to what we preach to founders. There are no overnight successes. You got to build it with the right infrastructure, the right fabric. You got to know exactly the product you're building and why you're building it. And you got to earn the right to keep building. And that's how you build a very healthy company that can scale and won't topple over down the road. And so that was we raised an $11 million first fund. We could have deployed that in 3 months, as we all know, right? That would have been difficult, and we would have gotten in great deals, but we deployed it over 2.5 years, right? And then this fund that we've raised, $31 million fund too, we've been deploying it over 1.5 years, and it's going to be a 2.5, 3-year fund. So consistency, the way we approach, we never ever cared about who the lead investor was or who was on the cap table in a world where people were like, I'm going to follow whatever Andreessen or Sequoia does so I can build my fund. We have our own conviction. And if you look at the diversity of funds that we've invested with or co-invested with us, it is broad because we believe in what we believe in and we don't care what other people think, right? Either we see something that fits it. So I think we've been very consistent. The only thing that changed from Fund 1 to Fund 2 now is we're leading and co-leading, early deals, right? And maybe we're going like a little earlier in Fund 1. We went a little later. Some of the thematics have changed. We're proud generalists, right? Like we just believe that the world changes and tech changes so quickly that we didn't want to box. We again go back to like the best companies are usually built by the best talent. Now there's certain areas we won't invest in and we'll probably never invest in because we just don't know it. But I think broad generalists across lots of different, broad thematics that we believe in where the world is going, the same way we believed in mobile in 2008 when people said we were crazy, the same way we believed we found social when social was MySpace and there was no social platform. We try and find things that we think are the next great trends 5 to 10 years, but that's changing. And a lot of that comes bottoms up too, from like amazing talent. So consistency across the board, but more now ownership, writing bigger checks. And I think that's kind of, I don't know where that evolves and how that goes in the future, but I think it's always with the same lens of how do we assessing talent a certain way, investing a certain way, and then working with like amazing, like-minded firms that we think are valuable, like you guys, to a founder early on, because there's certain firms that are not.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I think the consistency to like who you are and how you operate is important because that's going to enable you to put your best foot forward every time. And I think the other thing you mentioned about like the generalist approach for you, and at the expense of sounding cheesy with the Ocean's name, that enables you to kind of ride whatever wave comes next, right? And you guys can just always be on it. And so, yeah, kudos to allowing me to use that cheesy word there.
You can always be cheesy with me. We love being cheesy with each other.
There we go. I appreciate that, Steve. We'll have to make some more laughs with that over hopefully a Knicks win sometime soon at a bar at the court. But and then you, as you've mentioned, like you are a New York tech institution, OG, whatever phrase you want to use, it applies to you. And right now, the New York tech scene is just booming. It is going bonkers right now. And so I'll ask actually a different question, which is, what do you think needs to be fixed or changed about the New York tech ecosystem, despite the fact that it's having an amazing resurgence?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's really like personally rewarding for all of us to see like this ecosystem, and like your event, that you guys did last week was incredible with the emerging managers, and like that didn't exist 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago. Like it just wouldn't have ever happened at that scale. I think New York has always been more collaborative, and I really hope it stays that way. New York has always been more diverse, and I really hope it stays that way. I think all of us who like bleed New York know that why we stay here and not move out west is because of that authenticity of what New York is about. Because New York isn't just tech. I can go to a restaurant or a coffee shop and I can talk about sports. I could talk about finance. I could talk about retail. I could talk about luxury goods, and I could talk about tech, and it's not tech 24/7. So I don't know if it's about what needs to be fixed, because I think we're doing a really good job, right? I think we can continue to, I think the thing we want to fix would be the thing we can't, which is making it a little cheaper to live here and start companies here. Like that would really help. But I think it's more that I hope New York can, I hope firms that are emerging here really understand that we're going to be better off not stabbing each other like it happens at times in the Valley. We're better off locking arms with each other. We're better off partnering and collaborating. Let's make sure we're always thinking about diversity of everything, right? Like, let's remember our roots here, that New York is the epicenter of so many industries. And I think if we do that, New York will continue to flourish. So I think that's true. It's always going to be hard to attract all of the, the engineers in mass, especially, I think the Valley always has that, and some of the real deep hard tech, I think the Valley still will have an advantage on. But we're now at a point in the tech transformation, still early innings, but where every single industry is being transformed by tech, and there's no better city than New York to do that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, and appreciate anytime someone's got some praise for New York, I'm all for it. So great kind of ode to New York there. And maybe winding down here a bit on our episode, I chatted with one of your LPs, and he had said that Steven's got an iron will and is absolutely relentless. And I'm just curious, where do those traits come from?
I think it's like I was born always like I played sports growing up. Like, believe it or not, I was a basketball player. I played basketball. I was like, I was the token Jewish kid that like made the team with no one else was Jewish on, like the Catholic Youth League, because like I had to play there because I needed that competition. So I think it's always like, I hate losing. I always wanted to win. I've been competitive. And I think growing up where my parents were divorced at a pretty early age, like, and my mom went back to work and out of work, like I was like, you just gotta, you learn how to, you kind of either want to win or you don't want to win. And I just only know how to win. And I think like that's been a pattern. So, I got thick skin. I take a lot of no's. I heard a lot of no's from a lot of LPs over the last couple of years. I heard no from investors like Barry Schuler at DFJ when we were at Quattro, and then he came into Foursquare because he's like, I can't believe I said no to that one, right? And I think one of the things I love is just in life is proving people wrong.
Yeah, no, makes a ton of sense there. And yeah, proving folks wrong always feels great, particularly when you did it on your own path and the way you want it, which is the way you do, which is always great to hear. And this is, I know we've been a long time in this episode. This will actually be my last question. And so it's, I've heard you're a huge fan of 90s concerts. You've alluded to some, bands that you're a fan of, but can you share with us, your most memorable 90s concert experience?
Oh, you're going deep. Listen, I can spend all day talking, as you know. We have so much fun hanging out. But all right, since you asked, I think the thing that probably takes the cake is Lollapalooza at Randall's Island, and I think it was 1993 or four. It was Green Day, Smashing Pumpkins, Beastie Boys, Tribe Called Quest. I was a diehard hip hop fan, 90s hip hop. I was a diehard 90s grunge, just a product of all 90s. And I think that like encapsulated it for me because it was like the spectrum of from like Tribe Called Quest, which was like the king of the hill in hip hop during that time, all the way to like Smashing Pumpkins and Green Day, which were like these emerging grunge bands. And like, believe it or not, Brad Pitt over here was like body surfing. And so I don't know. I still have that like memory. And Randall's Island was a mess. It was like all muddy. It was a disaster, but it was insanely fun.
No, that's a great story. I mean, anytime you can be body surfing at a concert, you've succeeded. And I guess yeah. On that note, thank you to Steven Rosenblatt, the New York City tech OG. Now I know the Lollapalooza OG as well. So thank you again for sharing the inside baseball on Oceans.
Richard, always a pleasure. Keep doing all the amazing stuff that you and Rick and Equal seriously is doing for the emerging community. 10 years from now, I have no doubt that you guys are going to be a like the brand that everyone's like, how did they build this amazing brand? And it's just like this community is so important. So thanks for everything you guys do.
Yeah, no, thank you, Stephen, and thanks for the praise. Appreciate it.